Ever heard those stories about someone hitting rock bottom, ready to give up, and then bam, something unexpected comes along, reignites their passion? That's what we're looking at today, this idea of second chances, unexpected turnarounds. But we're focusing on film, specifically, the making of the movie Shahid. And it's not your typical big Bollywood, extravaganza. This is about how limitations can actually spark creativity.
Right, limitations as a springboard.
Exactly. And how one film can shake things up. Not just, for the audience, but for everyone involved.
Yeah.
So we're going deep into how this movie was made, using accounts from the people who were there right in the thick of it.
Behind the scenes stuff, always fascinating.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Our mission, I guess you could say, is to figure out how a film, without all the usual bells and whistles, big budget special effects, all that managed to become so significant and impactful.
Yeah, Shahid definitely made its mark. And it's interesting when you consider the director Hansal Mehta, he was at a point where he basically given up on filmmaking.
I read that somewhere too, like he was disillusioned.
Yeah, completely burned out. The spark was gone. And then along comes this story of Shahid Azmi, this lawyer who was assassinated. And it just grabs hold of Mehta and doesn't let go.
Powerful story.
It really is. And it speaks to how a compelling narrative can pull someone back, rekindle that creative fire.
For sure. And from what I understand, the making of this film was anything but conventional.
Oh, yeah. It wasn't your typical big studio production at all. More like a guerrilla film crew is how it's been described.
Guerrilla filmmaking.
Right.
What did that even look like?
Basically a small, dedicated team working with limited resources, whatever they could get their hands on, but fueled by passion and a shared commitment to telling the story.
Scrappy.
Very much so. And they had support from key figures, Sunil Bora and Anurag Kashyap. So they weren't completely alone, but still it was a far cry from the typical Bollywood production.
And the equipment they used, I read they had this mishmash of different cameras, like not a top-of-the-line consistent setup at all.
Yeah, you're right. It was a mix of Canon 70s, 5Ds, then some Red cameras, 1s, MXs, even an Alexa thrown in there. It wasn't a carefully curated selection. It was more like, okay, what can we get our hands on at this point?
Making do.
Exactly. They filmed in bursts over 11 months. This patchwork approach really speaks to their dedication.
And it makes you wonder,
Yeah.
right? Even without the perfect equipment, the ideal resources, they still managed to create something powerful. Maybe limitations aren't always a bad thing.
Sometimes limitations force you to be more creative to find solutions you wouldn't have considered otherwise.
And this make-it-work attitude led to some incredible discoveries, especially with casting Rajkumar Rao, who delivers an amazing performance as Shahid wasn't actually their first choice.
No, they initially had someone else in mind.
Yeah.
Maybe a more conventional Bollywood star, someone with a bigger name.
Can you imagine how different the film would have been?
It would have had a completely different feel, I think. By going with Rao, they found an actor who embodied the character perfectly. Exactly. And it wasn't just Rao. Shahid was also significant for Arijit Singh, the singer.
He's huge now.
It was one of his early breaks in Bollywood. And you can see how this film wasn't just a turning point for the director, it was a platform for emerging talent across the board.
So it wasn't the budget or the fancy equipment that made Shahid special. It was the passion, the resourcefulness, and the sheer determination to tell this story.
You nailed it. And those limitations they faced, they became a strength, a driving force. They had to focus on what truly mattered, the core of the story.
Less is more sometimes.
Absolutely. In a way, it stripped away all the unnecessary distractions. And at its heart, filmmaking is about connecting with an audience on an emotional level.
It makes you think about your own life, your own challenges and passions. When you're facing obstacles, how can you adopt that make-it-work mentality? Could those limitations actually lead to something more innovative, more impactful? That's something worth pondering, I think, even after this deep dive is over.
Definitely food for thought.